Story actually begins with his Rowan times and splints and healing of broken bones. That's where my story really truly begins. I had this idea of using splints to heal broken bones. There's this one group that was doing a compression cast, compression wrap, that seemed to compress the flesh and bone together to actually make it what's called, but they couldn't get it right. And with my splints, they actually were able to heal bones more straight. And I also had these other ideas involving clay and even honey wax. Honey from bees to create this this hay / honey wrap around the wound to basically create a cast that my people were working on. And at first it could only heal about 1/3 of the broken bones, but they were working on it. And then there was 2/3, and then one group came that could actually wrap. They were wrapping, and we applied the wrap to my idea. And then there was actually another group, I forget where they were from, if they were from Singapore or China or someplace, but what they did was they actually stuck needles in to hold the pieces of the bone more firmly and immobilize the bone. It was rather nasty, and I was like, ooh, but they upped the broken bone ratio up to, like, I think it was 85 to 95% of broken bones, except for the spiral fracture, were able to be healed at that point in time. Anyway, and that's when I really became Aaron, or Aaron, and the Great King. And I called for a library, and I also invented the wheel and started bending the wheel, and the wheels were originally made out of solid pieces of trees that were later on, then they started using steel to band the steel wheels. And then and I was this great king, blah blah blah, and there was also some torch tests and everything else like that. And then way later on, I'm figuring out the world's first light bulb. And there's noticed that they can make metal glow hot, red hot, and create heat. And I'm like, well, that's cool. And then they're heating it up, and the problem is when it gets up to a certain temperature, it melts. Although they do make some thicker metal that doesn't melt. And I'm like, that's great. All you gotta do now is keep it from melting. So they do this, and they get it to where the metal can just glow a very bright orange. But it's not really a light yet, and it's dangerous. And this is where I start saying, well, maybe put it with some glass around it. And I start thinking, well, maybe not a single line, but a curly line. And that's where I guess the E really comes from, is I invented the element, or the curliness of the two pieces of metal. And then my people, because I'm the steel king, or steel person, because I have so many steam engines and everything else, and I can do so much refining, and I'm also the one who actually knows about tantalum, which is this wonderful element which can take the heat. And originally they only knew about maybe 10-20 of the actual base states of matter, or whatever. You know how it goes 1 through, I think they only knew about 12, and then we got 36. Now I think there's like 120 different forms of matter, and it's kind of crazy because there's like subcategories. But originally there was only like 4 or 5 or 6, and then there were 13, and then there were like 20 and 36, and then there were 68, and then there were 72 at one point in time, which is why tantalum was put at 72. Well, actually, it was kind of like arbitrary anyway. I just kind of said, put it there. And that's exactly what they did. So, anyway, so that's kind of my story, and how it goes from how I go from before Roman times to Roman times. And another part of it, too, is how I had Spartans and military people were getting their bones broken. So all of a sudden, they even said my men could live forever because they could survive a break, which was the #1 killer of people back then, is a broken bone. So my men became fiercely loyal. In fact, farmers who broke their arms would come to my city and do stuff for me. And I wanted a world library, and also wanted farms to be set up. And so farmers started migrating to my city. I had one city set up with a great library. And this city was set up, and people from all over the world came there to share their knowledge. And some people had to be brought in to show their knowledge, because there was language barriers and stuff like that. And at first people were hesitant because they didn't know if I would give back their experts. And I promised them, and my men promised them. And my men traveled to these far off lands and then brought these experts back. And that's when my word became like law. Or, you know, if I said it was going to be done, it was done. And that was that. And plus, these people's ideas of what they wanted to build were also built in this great city which housed a great library. And the city became huge. And I never saw the city. But I knew of its existence because, you know, I was the one calling for it to be created. And in fact, the Great Library, which a lot of it was actually taken to the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress is kind of like the World Library of Mythic. It kind of expanded and expanded and expanded, and actually took a lot of the great teaching and great knowledge of the original Indian city, or whatever, where it originally was. A lot of it was moved from there and moved over the years. You know, it went all over. So anyway, but this is the story of Aaron, or the Aryan race, or element, me, and how I, the story of Alexander the Great King, how I became a great king, how I was. And the different phases that my life went through, and how everything changed for humanity, and how acids were originally called bases, but then later on, you know, when I wanted acids purified, they realized that acids were acids, and that they're called bases and something or other, and then they were changed because humanity learned more knowledge and really truly started to understand what things were. Mostly because I invented steam and flight and everything else, and my kingdom was becoming great. And plus, not to mention, you know, so many Spartans as well as warriors were so good. And another thing happened too. My military men knew so much about how to build things, or knew about military maneuvers, that they applied what they knew about military maneuvers to building. And people actually started to build in unison. You know, how people, war and death was very, very, very common. Everyone knew about war and death. But when it came to building things, nobody really applied unison or building things together like that. And what my Spartans really did is they applied military tactics to construction. So everybody would pool together. They built buildings like a military does maneuvers. Because back then death was very common. But all of a sudden, my military people were building things like a military would build things. Like Regiment 1 would go and do this. Regiment 2 would do that. And they divided my building crew into regiments. Even though they weren't fighting, they were building regiments. Because everyone knew about fighting, but not too much building or building in unison was ever done. So my military men, in fact, these two enemies came together. One of them had gotten a broken arm, and the other one had gotten a broken something or other way in the past. It was a whole attack thing, and I've explained it before. But basically, these people came together and applied what they knew about military and military tactics to building. And all of a sudden, a huge kingdom became. A great, great city, they called it. A great civilization. And that's where I started to pick up speed and actually started to become the great, legendary person that I am. And everyone said I had a secret, and they called me the son of myself. And it was just kind of weird because I was this legendary inventor.